Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Welcome to Selling Your Solar Home with Solar United Neighbors. We're going to give it a minute or two and let people continue to log on. In the meantime, for those of you who are already joining, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. You can share your name, pronouns, where you're calling in from. And again, we'll give it just 1 or 2 minutes to let people trickle into our webinar today. We're so excited to have you all joining us. I see lots more people joining, and people are starting to introduce themselves in the chat box. Thanks for being here. Virginia, Minnesota, welcome, welcome. For those that have just hopped on, we're introducing ourselves, name, pronouns, and where you're calling in the chat box. And we'll give it 30 more seconds before we get going. But I will start by first introducing myself. My name is Kinsley Duffler. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a program manager here with Solar United Neighbors. Really excited to have you all logging on for our webinar focused on selling your solar home. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Next slide, please, Annie. All right, let's start with just a little bit of housekeeping so that we can make sure everyone is able to fully participate today. First and foremost, this meeting is being recorded, and we will share that recording with you all afterwards in case you want to refer back and rewatch anything. And next, feel free to continue interacting with each other and with us in the chat box. However, for any questions that you would like to ask the panelists, please use the Q&A feature. This will help us to keep track of those questions so that we can answer as many as possible. And you should see the Q&A function in your Zoom toolbar. It usually shows up at the bottom of your Zoom box next to the chat box and other features. If you're having trouble finding the Q&A function, just let us know. But this is how we will take questions from audience members for our panelists. We can go to the next slide. So just a quick outline of what we're going to cover today. Our agenda is pretty straightforward. First, I will share a couple of slides about Solar United Neighbors for those of you who might be new to joining us. And then each of our panelists will have some time to share their advice and best practices for selling a solar home. And finally, we'll open it up for questions during the second half of the hour. So this is really your chance to ask anything you've been wondering about how to sell or buy a house with solar panels. And again, for those questions, please use the Q&A Zoom feature. Next. So to start, here's a little bit about Solar United Neighbors, or SUN. SUN is a national nonprofit organization, and we help people understand and install solar panels. We are not a solar installer, and we're vendor neutral, which means we are not trying to sell you anything or to promote one product over another. What we are at SUN is a community of people building a new energy system with rooftop solar at the cornerstone. Solar United Neighbors began in 2007 when our executive director's son and his friend decided they wanted to install solar panels on their homes. At this time, back in 2007, going solar seemed pretty complicated and expensive, but the kids were determined. So Anya, our executive director, wondered if some sort of bulk purchase campaign might make solar more affordable and make it easier to learn about the process together with others. So the boys knocked on their neighbors' doors, and in just 2 weeks, they were able to get 50 neighbors signed up who also wanted to go solar. This group in Washington, D.C. was Sun's first solar co-op. And soon after that, other neighborhoods from across the region started organizing solar co-ops, and Sun grew out of this movement. Fast forward to today, Sun now has members in all 50 states as well as Puerto Rico, and we have helped install solar on more than 10,000 homes. Next. At Sun, we create change by helping people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. We help individuals and organizations install solar on their home, business, or other property through solar co-ops or programs such as Switch Together or programs specifically for nonprofits. We strive to make the process fun, and we encourage solar supporters to join together. Sun often holds events like solar tours and happy hours for you to meet others in your community who are also interested in solar energy. And Sun leads the charge when fighting for our energy rights because we believe everyone deserves access to affordable energy and fair compensation for the energy they produce. We advocate for solar policies on a local, statewide, and national level. And with that, let's move on to meet the wonderful panelists who will be speaking today. So I'm honored to introduce Janelle, Stephen, and Catherine. Janelle McGill is a realtor and energy efficiency renovation consultant in Colorado. Janelle teaches a continuing education course on solar and real estate to real estate agents around the state of Colorado, and she speaks nationally at conferences and in webinars to discuss the complexities of selling homes with solar. Stephen Murphy is a solar advocate working to help people reduce their reliance on fossil fuels. Stephen was a homeowner in Florida who put solar on their roof along with battery backup for resilience during hurricanes. When Stephen moved, he sold the solar home in Florida. He is presently a renter in Evanston, Illinois, and gets electricity through community solar. Stephen is also a proud owner of an electric vehicle. Catherine Hope Cunningham is a current leading realtor and former ETA licensed solar professional in Columbus, Ohio. She has spent a decade designing solar arrays, selling listings consistently at or above market price, helping buyers find and afford the home of their dreams in a competitive market, and advocating for her clients. Catherine recently received her RSPS designation, specializing in resort and second home properties, and is a member of the Columbus Board of Realtors Sustainability Task Force. So thank you so much, Janelle, Stephen, and Catherine, for being with us today. And with that, I will hand it to Janelle to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. So it sounds like what we're going to do is each of us kind of introduce some topics and a lot of questions that we typically get in my field of work from a lot of buyers and sellers. And then we're going to open it up to everybody to ask questions. So I will be brief in this so we can move it over to Stephen and then Catherine. Kind of wanted to basically hit on three major points. And Catherine, because our jobs are very similar, we're going to cover a lot of the same topics. So we're going to try to stay out of her lane and let her discuss what she wants to discuss. But as far as here in Colorado and what I'm also hearing about in most of the country is three issues. One is valuation and how do homeowners determine what that valuation is? Two, what are some appraisal issues? And three, who all gets involved and what are homeowners really supposed to do before they're listing their home with solar? So first, valuation. This is something that a lot of people are now getting used to hearing about, but it's still kind of the biggest, best kept secret. But there is a website called pvvalue.com. And this website was developed by Sandia Labs, one of the national labs. And it was produced in partnership with a bunch of nonprofits, but also the US Department of Energy. And this is a website that is very bare bones. For those of us that are older, think back to like some MS-DOS programs. So it's not a fancy website, but it works perfectly. And what it does is it spits out a number at the end after you put in all of your solar information. So it helps level the playing field and figure out how to value each system when every system is different. Your install dates are different. Your warranties are different. The size of your panels are different. The size of your system, how many kilowatts you have are different. All of that and your utility bills go into this valuation system to help you determine a contributory value for your home. So as an agent, what I do when I have a seller that has solar on their house and they're getting ready to sell, I figure out what that regular sales price would be using all of the comparable homes in the area. And you come up with that number of what I would list your house for if there wasn't solar. And then I would use the report from pvvalue.com, which includes all of the information that the homeowner can give me or that we can then collect if they don't have it. to be able to plug in the details, and you're putting in things like the tilt, the azimuth, which determines your latitude and longitude and angle that it's catching the sun. It knows where you are in time, and it pulls in your utility data. A lot of those values are manipulatable, so you can change it if it's pulling in not quite the right information, but you can also go with the defaults to get a very regular number. And once you receive that total, then the idea is that your price in the marketplace would be that comparable price plus that contributory value of the solar. And those are details that you're going to be passing on to an appraiser, that they will hopefully take into account. Now, going straight into the appraisal issues, here's the problem. If you have a lease, none of this applies. There is zero value for a home with a lease. I am very much against leases in the residential sphere. There are very few places where they make sense. That's definitely one of the higher number things that are being sold to you from door-to-door solar salesmen. And I think it's important for the general public to understand that no money down and a fixed payment per month is not necessarily your best solution. So being able to understand why leases are not fantastic in residential space, they make a lot of sense in commercial, so there is a place for them. But residential homeowners would do a lot better by having a purchased system. Now, one of the newer issues with appraisals, and I didn't have issues like this for years, even though it was still an underwriting rule with Fannie and Freddie. That's basically our Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are lending institutions behind the scenes that are buying and trading all of these mortgage-backed securities. So Fannie has revamped and sort of made it more prominent that any solar array on your home that has a UCC filing on it, so if you have a loan still existing, the appraiser cannot add value. And we always had success here in the past until about the beginning of 2024. So the last 2 years, it's been pretty difficult to fight this. Appraisers, as long as it was an owned system, even if you had a loan, they were giving you additional value. If you have a loan now, they expect that loan to be paid off prior to an appraisal, not at closing, which causes a lot of issues when you're planning on selling your house. And even if you have a buyer that's planning on assuming your loan, then obviously this won't work at all. If you're planning on paying your loan off at closing, this will also not work. So finding ways with your agent and your financial advisors and your lenders, advance of putting your home on the market is important right now, because sometimes you're able to get some additional value if there's still a loan on it, but a lot of times you're going to need to find ways to pay it off prior to listing the home, or at least prior to having the appraisal done on your home, if an appraisal is needed. If you have a cash buyer, or you have a cash buyer that's putting a significant down payment, then you won't have to worry about this, but you're not going to have an appraisal, so it doesn't apply. But for the most part, most homes being sold right now are people doing less than 20% down and getting a loan. So it's just something for homeowners to be aware that could cause a little kink in their sales process. And then lastly, there are lots of other partners involved when you go to sell your house. So as much as all of us solar advocates, I've been in this solar sphere for 30 years, since I got my degree in environmental science and building science and energy efficiency, CU Boulder in the late 90s. I love solar. I absolutely believe in it. And I wish this process was always easy, but it's not. It takes some extra steps. It's extra work for the agents, and it's extra work for the homeowners to make sure we have everything that we need to properly market your home. And the buyers lenders need to be involved. The title company needs to be involved. We may need to reach out to your solar provider to grab installation information prior to selling so that we have what we need. We might need utility bills from your utility company to make sure we've got great averages, and we can put that in part of our marketing. And then we need to know, when you buy a home with solar, you need to make sure that's covered on your utility bill, or on your insurance policies. So pretty much everybody involved in the buying and selling process is also involved and has something to say about there being solar on the house. So just giving yourself some extra time and understanding that the goal is always to get extra value out of these sales. But there's some extra work that has to go into it to try to make sure it can happen.
Well, that was great. I learned a lot there. I'm glad I paid for my solar system up front. I viewed when I put in the solar system, I did it through a co-op. I viewed it, we had investments and we had money set aside for retirement. And I viewed it as just going from taking out of mutual funds and putting it in to my solar because it paid for itself over time. When we installed it in 2018, we made the decision to move forward with solar and battery. And we did battery, not so much, we did it for hurricanes. I had lived in Florida for 20 years and I had 4 times had my power cut out for over a week in Florida. And so I said, I don't want that again. That's no fun. And so we went ahead and put one battery in, and that battery actually never was tested other than when I tested it to make sure it worked. Because in 4 years we lived there, we never had a hurricane. But it really, I think it's a good investment. It's basically a cup of coffee a day, about $1.25 a day when you figure it out over the life of the warranty. We when we decided to sell and we didn't want we moved because of COVID. I'm sure COVID impacted many people's lives, but our kids live in the Midwest. Our one son lives in Chicago, where we live now, and the other son lives in St. Louis with the grandkids. And so we decided after 22 years in Florida and a career in Florida that it was time to move back to be closer to kids and family. We had spent a lot of time and energy, not only doing solar, but automating things, going for energy efficiency. We put in, besides the solar panels and the battery, we put in uh, uh, a hybrid heat pump for a hot water heater, which saved us an immense amount of money. We went to a high efficiency pool pump, which reduced energy usage. And we also what else did we do? We did something else that escapes me. Uh, when we got ready to sell the house, I went through and put together a detailed analysis of energy bills prior to installing solar, what it costs to basically air condition your home in Florida. And then I went to what it cost after uh, uh, installing the solar. So I had that data. Then I also had a whole listing of everything that we had done. I listed out the fact because I bought this through the solar co-op, we actually had a warranty which could be sold to the new buyers of the home. So they walked into a situation where they still had 15 years left on a warranty with a good company that's still in existence today. Uh, so I put that together, and then I put all the things together about the other automation things I had done, like Hue lights and Ethernet cabling throughout the house, and a new energy efficient air conditioning system with a high CER value. This was going to be our forever home, but then things changed, and so that's why we did it. I really, I can't say for sure that doing all that made the house sell for more because it was a really crazy time in 20 when did we sell the house? We moved here in 2022. We sold it in 2022 and people were just buying like crazy then. We had 15 offers in one day. And the highest offer, he was a tech guy, so he was really interested in the solar and offered the most amount of money. And in fact, he has installed an additional 14 panels in the front of the house. I had 8.28 kilowatts in the back of the house, but because he put a pool heater in and he put in an electric car, which I didn't have at that time, he put in more batteries. I mean, more panels. So I think having that appeal to him because he was already moving in that direction. I do have to say the realtor I worked with, I sort of had to push her to have any mention of solar in the listing. She didn't think that was a good idea. I thought it was, and I prevailed. But anyway, that's it was an interesting experience doing it. As you can see, there's my wife and I in the picture, but we love our solar home. So, thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. I have to say that when I saw the slides that Janelle and Stephen had put together, I definitely felt seen because we're all sharing the same message. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today, Janelle and Stephen have addressed. We're going to go a little bit deeper into maybe some um, specifics and statistics. But Janelle mentioned earlier leased systems. If you have an owned array, then your house should sell easily or in this essentially reflecting the same rates as the other homes in your market. The solar really shouldn't affect it one way or another. And I'm going to take this a step further. We talked earlier about leased systems resulting in potential delays, complications, and reduced net. And I do agree with Janelle that that is the case. One thing we haven't gone too deeply into yet is expecting your future buyers to assume a loan. So if you have a loan on your system, which many people do, then you might consider, as Janelle pointed out, paying off that loan for more than just appraisal purposes. I would also add that when you pay off the loan, you're going to have more buyers. You're going to have more buyers interested in the home. So our job as realtors is to create an environment in which multiple parties are interested at the home simultaneously. If we can create an environment where there is competitive bidding, that's certainly what's best for the seller. That was happening a lot, as Stephen mentioned in 2022. Depending upon your geographic area, that may still be happening. I know it's still happening where I am in Central Ohio. But if you think about it from the standpoint of not just a buyer, but also the buyer's lender. So the buyer is most likely going to be financed. Statistically speaking, you're going to have more financed buyers than cash buyers. And so not only will they might not want to take on an additional loan in addition to their mortgage, but also their lender may or may not actually allow them to do so. So that's kind of up to the bank, and every bank is going to approach that a little bit differently. But I think Janelle's wisdom about, consider paying off that loan before you list your house, try to, get creative in ways that you might be able to do that. What I think you're going to find is that if you have competitive bidding on your home, any money that you may have spent doing that may naturally come back to you in the increased value of the home with competitive bidding. And so that may increase your net ultimately if you decide to pay off that loan. Second bullet point, when you are marketing, and Stephen mentioned this as well, when you're marketing, you want to, yes, mention the solar, but I would say prioritize bringing attention to the lower utility bills over marketing the solar array. Yes, it's good to bring attention to the solar array, but the solar array is, statistically speaking, it's attractive to many consumers. It's statistically speaking, if we go to the NAR sustainability report, which we have listed there, or you can just Google it if you want to, just simply NAR Sustainability Report 2025. If you go to page 23 of that report, you'll see some geographic breakdowns of consumer interest and attitudes towards not just solar, but energy efficiency and marketing in general. But you know what is appealing to all buyers is lower utility bills. Everybody loves low utility bills. Everybody loves, not having to pay their electric bill. Depending upon where you are geographically, the consumer interest in um, high efficiency homes ranges somewhere between 50% and 70%. So that actually is good. It's a good thing. But what that means is that somewhere between 50% and 30% either has no interest at all or might actually have an opposition to it. So I say, you know what? Yes, definitely include the solar array in the pictures, but bring attention to the lower utility bills because everybody loves a low utility bill. And to address a little bit of what Stephen said, I actually have, so my home was solar when I sold it in 2022. Again, actually very similar to the same time that Stephen sold his home. And so we had for a long time very low interest rates, and we actually got very spoiled by low interest rates nationally. And what that did is it sort of organically and naturally boosted property rates or property appraisals and values. And we got kind of used to that. And so when I went to list my home, actually, if you could go to the next slide, please, because this is being addressed in the next slide. I'm going to go to the second bullet point on this slide. We're going to skip the first one for just a second, but the second one, the interest rate fluctuation affects property value more than the presence or absence of green features. And so it's hard to say that when you spend X amount of money on a solar array that you're going to get X amount of money back dollar for dollar. That's not necessarily a safe assumption because the lowering and the raising of interest rates is going to affect everyone's property values. So when interest rates go up, as they did in June of 2022, which I found out the hard way what happens when interest rates go up 3/4 of a point in one day. That was the largest interest rate hike since 1980 something. And of course, buyers didn't have quite the buying power that they did the week before or the month before. And so that definitely affected how many buyers were out there in my price range. And that affected the competitive bidding on the home. So I will say though, Stephen, that solar actually found me my buyer. So it may not have necessarily translated into dollar for dollar, we're going to get this back, everything we spent on it. But it did definitely find me my buyer because they wanted solar on the home. Now, did they necessarily pay more for it? Well, I mean, interest rates had just gone up 3/4 of a point in one day, and we're tracking up more from there. And so I would say when you value your home, pay attention to what's happening at the federal level, pay attention to what's happening at the interest rates. Know that when interest rates go up, property values tend to stabilize. Sometimes they go down, and the opposite is true when when interest rates go down, property values tend to go up. And so you definitely want to be paying attention to the interest rates as you are listing your house. The last thing is, and again, Stephen mentioned this earlier, to eliminate any mystery around solar, do provide documentation in the MLS for all of your solar. And I do recommend this being just boiled down into a 1 or 2 page PDF. Sometimes it's a little bit too much information. I know we're very tempted to just spit out all of the statistics and provide all the information we can. What's really important, number one, is the 12-month report of your electric bills. If you have them before and after solar, great. If not, just show me what it was after solar. If you can provide 12 months of reporting of see how low these bills were, that is good information to the buyer, but it's also very powerful information to the lender, because if they see that information, they actually may be able to approve the buyers for more money than what they had originally approved them for. And that actually happened to my friend who bought a solar house. So worked in her favor. You want to provide a full description of the system, including size, the materials used, the month and the year installed, any whoever the installer was, so that they can be in touch with that company if necessary. Any information about transferable warranties, and if financed, again, this is up to you, but Janelle and I are in agreement on this. If you financed your system, notate that the system will be paid off at closing. You're going to have more buyers and probably a higher net doing that. And again, if you can throw that all into a very simple one-page PDF and more information, it's first of all, it's going to answer a lot of questions that the buyers have, but also that the lenders might have. It'll reduce the amount of phone calls that you might be getting about those questions. And then if you just are very fully transparent, that gives a lot of consumer confidence that will then translate into hopefully multiple offers and a higher net.
Thank you all so much for the information. We have gotten a lot of questions coming in. So
See that?
yeah, let's go ahead and start answering questions. We'll start with the ones that are in the Q&A box, and then I also noted down some that were sent in the chat. So the first question that we have, the question is, this may be covered, but if I share Sun's guide on selling your solar home with a realtor, and that realtor insists they know the market more and basically ignores Sun's guide, how do I go about that? Someone has had this experience, even though the realtor is highly recommended.
It's tricky. I mean, our industry, I can't tell you how many online fights I've had with other realtors across the country in national forums about this issue. And it's one of the reasons that I created a CE course and I teach it, because we're only going to move forward with making this easier to get value and to show the value if we educate from the bottom up. And when I'm speaking at some of these international webinars, that's kind of what I tell people is the consumer is the guiding force. It's our job as the homeowner to say, I want somebody educated that knows how to do this, and to request that and keep pushing and asking for the cooperation. There will be some pushback. Not all agents believe in solar. I see it all the time, but I'm amazed that now, I mean, the last few classes I've taught over the last couple of months, I've had almost 100 agents in there. We have a lot of agents in the state of Colorado, but each time it's almost standing room only. We only have enough, we can only allow as many people as there are chairs. And so then we just end up adding a second class for the next day so that more people can come. And solar's not going anywhere. What we have in the marketplace is only going to be increasing and increasing and increasing as we try to, one, combat the raising energy prices that are going to be continuing to go up exponentially because of national data centers. So we have a really big strain on our grid that is really only just starting. And even if you're in one of those areas, I think I did see somebody say that they're in Virginia and there's a lot there. There's a lot going into Georgia and the Carolinas right now too. So they're feeling it very locally immediately, but the strain on the grid system is going to be nationally. And the more people that can have solar to offset that, or the more communities that invest more in renewable energy to help offset some of this need, the better. So in my opinion, and I think everybody's opinion, solar is going to keep coming. And as an agent, you can learn how to do it, or you can move aside. And I think it's completely fine to push back against agents that aren't willing to educate themselves on it, or educate them. Tell them if they're really highly recommended and they've had lots of success with your friends or your family or neighbors sales, then sit and talk to them about why this is important to you. And I think for the most part, they'll listen. And that's where, as a homeowner, you have the right to say, here's what I want you to do. Just like you did, saying, I want you to put this on the MLS. I want you to put this picture of the solar panels in your slide. I tell a lot of the agents that I'm teaching to go ahead and put some of those energy, redact all of the personal information, but use those energy bills and create your own slides for the picture slides, because everybody's looking at their homes on Zillow. They're looking at Zillow, they're looking at realtor.com. They're looking at pictures first before they read anything about the house. They go to the words just to, if they're interested in the pictures. So use those slides as an opportunity to advertise what you have. And I love doing that with the houses that I list that have solar, and putting up a slide that shows, here's what their savings are, here's what they're selling back to the grid if there's net metering involved, and be able to show that, because it's just like Catherine said, not everybody wants solar on their house. It's unfortunately a polarizing issue, but everybody wants to save money on their utility bills. They also are afraid of what they don't know. So putting all of that information out there in advance, making sure that your agent knows how to answer questions from a buyer's agent or from buyers when they call, helps make sure that there's no mystery around this process. So yeah, I'd push back and keep asking questions.
Thanks so much for that, Janelle. Let's move on to the next question. We got another one in the Q&A feature. My solar is with Sunrun and I paid the lease up front. So I pay no lease, but the maintenance on the solar panels are covered for 25 years. The contract is transferable to the buyer. Any thoughts? Catherine, do you want to jump in on this one?
So there's no lease. Am I understanding that it's an owned system, but there is a maintenance contract? That's interesting. That in where I live, it rains a lot, so we don't have to do a whole lot of maintenance. So it's and in other places it might be like very dusty, very windy, and so maybe maintenance is a thing in other places. So I personally have not ever had experience of having to maintain a system. The only thing that I ever pay anyone to do is when I have my gutters cleaned in fall and spring, I pay a little bit extra for the gutter guy to just like walk around the system, get the leaves away from it, and if there are any leaves at all, and just kind of give it an eyeball and look to see that it's okay. They don't actually have to do anything aside from maybe just clear away any debris that might be there. Does it make sense to transfer a maintenance agreement? It might, yeah, depending upon where you live. So certainly if the company is offering it, I would take them up on that. And then provide that information in the MLS, again, part of your one to 2 page PDF on transferable warranties and support and maintenance.
Can I pop in and say a little more on that too? We do have a lot of leases in place here in Colorado. It's basically, I do attribute the leases from Solar City and how it all began to creating this residential solar boom. Before the leases, it wasn't as easy for people to get solar, but having the leases opened up other opportunities for loans and everything else to make this all kick off and start being as popular as it is. And if people have leases, I know I talk down on them and it's a bummer, but if you have them, you have it. We have to deal with that. Right. So let's just figure out how that works. The problem is when you have a lease, one, you can't add value to your house because it's considered owned by a third party. It is not real property, so it cannot be added to an appraisal. And for most of the time, a buyer doesn't want to take on those payments. Sometimes the payments are fair and sometimes they're not. It just depends. But there are issues with your loan debt to income ratio in being able to take over that payment. So there are two issues usually that are hit right off the bat with a buyer. They can either qualify financially, so maybe they don't have a high enough score to actually take over the lease, because a solar company, the leaseholder can actually say, no, you don't qualify to take this on. So that's an issue, especially if you have maybe some FHA buyers. Second, the lender needs to be able to say, yes, this additional 80, 100, $120 payment per month now knocks you out of your debt to income ratio, so you no longer qualify to purchase the home. So those two issues are usually the biggest problems with trying to get these transferred. But I do say in my classes, the best gift you can have with a lease is to prepay it. If you have the ability to
Yes,
prepay
yes.
it, all other terms in the lease do stay in place for that 20-year period. It's still owned by a third party. You are technically renting them. You just no longer own rent. So the lease company they've already collected all of their money up front. They're responsible for the rest of those lease terms, and a buyer does have to sign on to that lease, even though there's no financial transfer anymore. But when that 20 years is up, the idea is that the lease company comes out and takes off the panels. So it is a great solution, and it is something that my clients that have had homes with leases, if they're in a financial position to pay that off, because again, you may not be getting a premium for your home because of it. But there are buyers that are willing to pay a little extra in their loan if they don't have to take over those lease payments. So there's certainly room for negotiation in here. And if you can be able to transfer that lease without any payments, it's a great situation. It's always better if you've bought it. But if this is the situation and you can prepay it, or you've taken over one that's been prepaid, I think that's a pretty great financial win.
Awesome. Thank you both. Stephen, our next question, I think, is for you. Someone asked to hear more. They're curious, Stephen, why your realtor did not want to advertise solar on the listing. And I might add on to that to loop back into what Janelle was saying earlier. If you have any thoughts as a solar seller to encourage realtors to take that seriously and advocate for yourself as a solar seller. Anything there, Stephen?
Well, I think she didn't know much about solar, and so she didn't want to, and she didn't think it would add much value at all. And I just thought it would. I mean, and so we didn't spend a lot of time. We just said there were, there were solar panels on the roof for lower utility bills, I think is what we said. Um, I think, I would defer to Janelle and Catherine, but I know I worked with a group in Bradenton where I lived, and there was one realtor who really specialized on working with solar homeowners in selling their homes, because she was really committed to the whole idea of electrifying homes and going solar. Uh, and you need champions like that to really move the industry forward. But I think one of the issues that I think one of the panelists raised is that energy is getting very expensive. This was the most expensive year for electricity that I've ever dealt with. I just live in a 3-bedroom flat in a 3-flat building in Evanston, Illinois. And I had utility bills that were over in the summertime over $170 a month. And that was after I got a 15% discount because I belong to a community a solar group. But it was really expensive, and I think that's going to drive everybody that can to move to look at ways to reduce their electrical bills. And I think solar is the way to go. And because the costs of solar are cheaper today than they were when I installed.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stephen. This next question might be a little bit of a quicker one. And Janelle, you might be best suited, or any of our panelists jump in. But the question is, are there realtors who are well versed in selling homes with solar, and is there a directory of this by state?
Hmm.
Yeah, when Stephen was just talking, I was thinking I should have said that before. So NAR has a designation called the green designation, and there are some other similar designations like that out there. But you can find a list on NAR's website of green agents. And to get that designation, you do learn about the valuation process and how to market it. It still could be an even better designation. There could be more information in there, but it sure beats nothing. And so there are certainly some directories out there. I usually, when people, we also are an state group too. So we have Facebook groups, and Catherine and I are probably on several together, that we network together. And sometimes, you'll have somebody say, hey, looking for a green agent in XYZ, who's out there. And so a lot of times agents from other places can help connect you with agents in your area, and finding those green designees through NAR is certainly a best first stop.
Awesome, very helpful. Another question that probably relates to many people if they're looking to sell a solar home. Someone asked, in my region, I am able to sell solar renewable energy credits with my solar system. Do these funds transfer easily to home buyers? Can anyone speak to the transfer of SRECs or solar renewable energy credits when selling a solar home?
Can I
Most
explain what SRECs are first?
Please do, thank you.
Yeah,
And then
so
once buyers know what they are.
yes, buyers don't know what they are. Even a lot of sellers don't. People who
Yeah.
have even bought solar don't know what SRECs are. And depending upon where you're living, it might not even be worth knowing. Like, for instance, here in Ohio, it's not even worth knowing because it's worth so very little. In another state, it might be worth more. But solar renewable energy credits. So every entity has an energy portfolio. It could be a state's energy portfolio, could be a corporation's energy portfolio that basically says we have X% renewables, X% brown energy, wherever those energy is coming from, they have an established portfolio. And in order to increase the amount of green energy in their portfolio, that entity would either have to own green energy themselves, or what's much easier way to do it is to just buy the credits from other people that do. But basically it's allowing them to claim other people's solar as part of their portfolio, and they pay money for the ability to do that. So that's what an SREC is. And as far as transferring them, first of all, you want to make sure that when you read the fine print of the contract that you've had with your installer, that you even own the SRECs in the first place. There are some installers that very sneakily put in the fine print, oh, by the way, we own the future SRECs, which, right now is a non-issue, at least for us in Ohio, but in future, those policies may change, and SRECs may become more valuable in the future. So SRECs can be sold with a broker. You can do it yourself. You can do it in your state. You can do it out of state. Other people are going to have, Janelle, you probably have more experience with this than I do because they're pretty worthless in Ohio right now anyway. But
They're
10
worth
years ago, it was worth a lot of money.
Yeah, they're worth something here in Colorado for
A lot.
sure.
Yep.
But what a lot of people don't understand, for here, it's not usually something built into the installer's contract. It's actually something that you are exchanging for state or local rebates. So when you get a rebate, I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we have a community-owned energy company, and we have really high renewable energy goals. And so they offer great incentives for installing solar, but you're in exchange, which a lot of people don't understand, but a lot of people don't want to get into the commodity of buying and selling RECs anyway. So most people don't mind just going ahead and exchanging it. But in exchange for that rebate and discount from the city, you're giving them the ability to claim your RECs. And so then they get to use that towards their renewable energy portfolio and show that they're meeting the goals that they're supposed to be meeting. So there isn't there is an exchange here, especially if you're not getting one of those rebates. But it's pretty rare to see a house that's being sold where the owner still has their renewable energy credits to be able to advertise that as something extra. It'd be like mineral rights. Those are almost always sold off prior to buying a house. So most of the time people wouldn't know what to do with them anyway.
Right.
But if you are in an area where they're worth something and you want to hold on to them, they may be worth something more in the future. So before you trade them for a $1,500 rebate for getting it installed, maybe look into, I'm not very familiar. I have a few clients that have sold them, but I'm not very familiar with the marketplace and what that looks like on what they would be, how you would even do that. But it's definitely an added interest. And one of the reasons also that leases are not great is the lease company usually keeps your RECs.
That's right.
So it's one of the things that a homeowner doesn't get out of that arrangement.
It's a very rare buyer that is familiar with the concept of SRECs.
Thank you all. And we can share the link for Sun's website on SREX if anyone is a visual learner and wants to read over some more information about that. Another question that we had come in, is it true that the appraisal is where value matters the most? And this person asked, I sold a solar home in Florida in 2019 and the appraiser gave solar no value. Has the standard changed since then? And this is for an owned system, no loan.
It matters. So the bottom line is your house is worth whatever buyer's going to be willing to pay for it.
Right.
It helps us figure out what we're going to list it for. But just as Catherine said, market conditions largely determine what your house is going to go for and what a buyer is willing to pay for it.
Yes.
If you're able to get a buyer that really is interested in solar or just loves your house and loves the idea that there is solar added onto it, and that's attractive to them and they're willing to pay for a premium of that. If they're getting an appraisal, the issue with the appraisal is that you just don't want a bad appraisal. So you don't want that appraisal to come in low because they're now putting zero value at that and putting you in line with other comps in the area and not taking the solar into account. And it's very hard to fight an appraisal once it's already been done. So trying to learn about how to value your system by using the pvvalue.com website, having buyers that are understanding that I'm willing to pay a little bit extra for this house because I love that it has solar on it and I want those lower utility bills. And then making sure that the appraiser has everything they need to add that value and there's nothing holding you back from doing it. Then you know that there's not going to be loan issues down the road. But the upfront value of the appraisers aren't determining that. The buyers are doing that. They're saying, I'm willing to pay X amount for your house. The reason the appraisal comes in is that you don't want issues after that agreement has already been reached. So trying to mitigate that is the important part.
Thanks, Janelle. We have a question that might be our last, or maybe we'll have time for one more quick one, but this is a forward-thinking question that perhaps each of you could give your perspective on. Someone asked, with electricity rates increasing like they are today, do you think solar may become more of a positive factor in selling than it previously had been? I see some nods, and I know we hit on this, but if anyone wants to speak more to that, moving into the future of selling a solar home.
Well, I saw that there in the chat, somebody was registering concern about the federal tax credit going away. And while that is true, that's a 30% federal tax credit. But I can tell you as a consumer in central Ohio, the rates in our area have gone up somewhere between 30 and 38%. in the last 2 years.
Right.
And we're talking about multiple height rakes, or rate hikes. And so, when you factor in the layer upon layer upon layer of rate hikes, and the fact that that's going to be ongoing. I mean, obviously, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how much or how fast that rates will increase, but we just do know that they are going to increase. So if there's any way that you can, that's the great thing about solar ownership. It's very predictable. Once you've got your array, you know exactly what you're paying for it. You know, if you're, paying on a loan, you know exactly when that loan is going to end, and you'll own it at the end of that. You're done paying for it. And so, yes, that's going to be very much a concern going forward with consumers, because I think, I don't know, can you speak to, Janelle or Stephen, can you speak to what the rates are doing in your area
Well, they're very,
relative to
as I
mine?
mentioned, they're the highest. I've lived here 3 years, and when I first got here, even in the summer, my utility bills were never over $50 or $60, and they were $175 this year.
Yeah.
So that's in 3 years. Now we had the weather was really hot this year, but that's going to continue. We're going to continue to have hot weather. So I think it's going to be it. I just looked up what the costs are per watt for a solar installation in Chicago. It's 360. Now I paid $1 because I went through a co-op, and in 2018 it was $1.98 a watt. But it's 360 now, and if you're saying electrical costs are going up that much, the payback might not be as good as it was when I did it for $2 a watt, but it'll still pay back probably in less than 10 years.
I'm glad you're mentioning ROI, because the more that the rates for energy increases, the faster that ROI accelerates.
Right,
And
exactly.
I used to say 7 years ish, depending on a lot of factors, which way the array was oriented, and how big the array was, but basically 7 years.
Right.
But now it could be like 5 or 6, just because of the increasing energy rates. So they've definitely solved that problem for us by raising all the costs of energy.
Yeah, thanks. Janelle, any final thoughts on this question or otherwise before we wrap?
Kind of the same thing here. We've been incredibly lucky because we have this unicorn of locally owned electricity companies with really high renewable energy percentages already in place, and goals to increase that.
Wow.
So that's allowed them to hedge some of the utility hikes, but they just met last week to increase them. I think it's 12%. And that's probably the biggest rate hike they've ever had. And it's because they're not able to pull as much interstate as they used to. And so what is available here, I mean, it's law of supply and demand, and there's a lot of demand now. And so the more I can't imagine solar not taking a huge, especially in a state like I'm in, or a state like Florida. Ohio and Illinois, the weather is not necessarily perfect for having so much solar, but we have a lot of sunshine here. And so some states are just going to naturally end up going to a lot more residential solar as part of the energy solution.
One last comment. It's not really about solar, but it's about energy. Electric cars have huge batteries, and almost every state now has time of use rates. And people are developing the interfaces so you can connect your car to your electrical connection, and you can fill your battery when the rates are the cheapest, and use your car to provide power to your unit when the rates are the most expensive, and save money that way. I think we're going to see a lot of creativity along those lines over the next few years, because rates are not going to go down, because the government does not like solar, and they don't like wind, and they will do everything they can to stop it.
Well, I think that solar has demonstrated itself to be cheaper across the board. And while, and the government might want to stop it, I think corporations are finding out, hey, the bottom line is cheaper if we do this. If we go solar, our bottom line, we start saving money
Right.
after 5 years. Yeah, the market will be there regardless.
Yep.
Thank you all. I hate to have to cut off such a fruitful conversation. I'm sure we could all stay on for another hour, maybe two, answering questions and discussing, but I do want to respect everyone's time today, and we are at the top of the hour. So thank you so much, Janelle and Catherine and Stephen, for sharing your experience and your expertise today. Thank you to everyone who shared questions. If we did not answer your question live during this hour, we have made note and we can include some answers in our follow-up resources that we send. If you ever have questions and you want to reach us at Solar United Neighbors, you can send an email to our help desk, which is helpdesk@solarunitedneighbors.org. And with that, I will let us all go. Thanks everyone for joining today.
Bye-bye.
Guys.
Thank you. Bye.